Thanks a lot. I'm going to make my presentation pretty quick. My research topic or title is about knowledge with kindness is power. Knowledge about and kindness relate to better attitude towards persons with autism spectrum disorder. And I'm Jess Datu. I'm currently connected to the Department of Special Education and Counseling of the Education University of Hong Kong. I'm also the lab director of the Science of Happiness and Positive Education Lab. So let me talk a bit about the structure of my presentation. I'll start off with a brief description about the problem that this preliminary research hopes to address. And I'm going to move towards a description of what theory might be able to support the predictions I actually forwarded in this project. And then I'll talk briefly about the methodological details of my study, and I'll share the findings, and I'll try to draw some key insights or takeaways from my study's findings. Of course, since my topic focuses on our attitude towards individuals or persons with autism spectrum disorder, so it's actually good to just have a brief overview about the symptoms or the common signs and symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. So probably the character you could see on your screen is might be pretty familiar to you because she's one of the most recently introduced characters of Sesame Street, Julia, who happened to portray a kid with autism spectrum disorder. That seems to be a good move in order to promote positive attitude towards ASD in our society. But of course, if we look at autism spectrum disorder in closer details, so we are referring to individuals who have like a consistent pattern of deficiencies on the way they effectively communicate and interact with the people around them. And it has to be generalizable in different contexts for us to be able to say that it's like a pervasive social communication and interaction difficulty. And it's common for us to observe them engaging in repetitive and restrictive patterns of behaviors. And These symptoms typically occur in the earliest phase of a person's development. Why there's a need for us to pay attention to attitude towards autism spectrum disorder? Because prior research shows that those of better knowledge about autism spectrum disorder, that is, those with better awareness on the signs, symptoms, and the nature of the developmental disorder, are likely to have more positive attitude towards some individuals with autism spectrum disorder. So that somehow confirmed prior studies findings. And then those who are more familiar with the symptoms of autism are likely to have a positive or accepting attitude towards individuals with ASD. And it's also like shown in prior research that individuals who had prior interactions or contact with individuals with autism are likely to have a positive attitude towards persons with autism. But there are studies that further magnify the gap, indicating the need to study the relationships between knowledge and attitude towards autism spectrum disorder in greater detail. Why? Because other studies actually demonstrated that knowledge about autism spectrum disorder did not relate to attitude towards this developmental disorder. So that essentially means that knowledge about autism doesn't really matter or doesn't really contribute to building accepting attitude towards individuals with autism. And most studies or almost all studies recruited college student, early adult, or teacher samples, which is not necessarily a bad idea. But the thing is, if the findings describe the relationship between knowledge and attitude towards autism spectrum disorder, in college students or the adults and teachers, the findings may not always be generalizable to um, individuals belonging to um, earlier phases of uh, human development, say, for example, adolescence, middle school, or maybe early childhood children. And then what's more alarming, I think, is that there's little work done on what protective or psychological resources that can protect these individuals or persons with autism from being discriminated by the people around them. And in order to address those research or empirical deficiencies, I actually wanted to explore how knowledge and um, knowledge and previous contact with persons with autism spectrum disorder might actually relate to attitude towards autism. But what I'm adding or contributing to the literature would be the contribution that specific psychological strengths might play in those associations. So, in particular, I'd like to propose that apart from knowledge about autism and previous contact or interactions with people with ASD, kindness might also contribute to increased understanding of not cognitive and psychological factors that may lead to greater acceptance towards individuals with autism. So my predictions that greater knowledge and higher levels of kindness, that is, our inclination to do kind deeds or kind actions to others or to the people around us, they're likely to lead to more accepting attitude towards individuals with autism, because according to contact hypothesis by Gordon Alpert and Clayton Barland, um, if you wanted to promote positive or desirable attitude towards a specific uh, group that is marginalized in our society, we need to provide opportunities to actually increase the public's understanding or knowledge about a specific marginalized group in a society. And perhaps many of us are aware that kids with autism, because of their atypical pattern of social and behavioral um, deficits, they're likely to get bullied and discriminated by typically developing students or even teachers. So that's why it's important that we increase the public's knowledge about this pervasive developmental disorder, and at the same time we promote opportunities for typically developing peers, even adults, to have closer interactions with persons with autism. So, in a way, that increased contact might help improve our sense of acceptance towards individuals with autism. So, I draw mainly on the contact hypothesis theory and the kindness literature to propose the relationships of um, knowledge about autism, a brief contact with persons with autism, and even kindness with attitude towards this developmental condition. So that's pretty much in sync with a previous study that I did that involved undergraduate students in the Philippine context, and another study that shows kind students in the US are more likely to have lower levels of stigma towards individuals with mental health difficulties or disorders. And what are my predictions confirming those prior studies findings? So, knowledge about autism might relate to better attitude towards persons with autism, even after controlling for age, gender, and prior interactions with individuals with autism. And kindness will positively predict attitude towards persons with autism, even after controlling for the above mentioned covariates. And some details about this particular study. So, I recruited 293 Filipino high school students from two government schools outside Metro Manila. Why? Because many of the studies published about the learning processes and outcomes in the Philippines were reflecting the experiences of students in urban contexts. And then I actually administered measures on autism awareness, kindness, even attitude towards individuals with autism. But instead of like asking them to report their level of agreement on certain items, I actually use a vignette approach in assessing attitude towards individuals with autism, in which a person with symptoms of autism was described in a story, and I actually asked or requested these high school students to reflect on to what extent they might have accepting or positive attitude towards the person or the main character in that story, in the Vignette story. So in a way, that kind of drifts away from the typical way of assessing attitude towards individuals with a different developmental condition, which heavily relied on self-reported surveys or measures. So if we turn to results, I'm able to confirm somehow the patterns of relationships between knowledge about autism and attitude towards this developmental disorder, because as you can see, they're positively correlated, and even kindness had positive associations with attitude towards individuals with autism. But these findings may not be enough to primarily address my study's hypotheses. So I actually did hierarchical regression analysis to demonstrate the extent to which previous contact with individuals with autism, knowledge about autism, and kindness might predict attitude towards autism. So, as you may notice, previous contact with a person with autism is actually negatively associated with attitude towards autism. So this simply means that those who had previous interactions with people with autism are less likely to discriminate those individuals diagnosed with autism. And then that's pretty much consistent with a step two. And then there's also evidence showing that knowledge about autism positively predicted attitude towards autism, which was consistent with prior research findings, because those who have like get greater awareness or understanding about autism are likely to have more accepting attitude. And that goes pretty much the same with kindness, because kindness positively predicted attitude towards autism spectrum disorder. So that means that high school students who are kinder are more likely to have more accepting attitude towards individuals with autism. So limitations of this study, it's a cross-sectional design, so it's really hard to tell whether kindness and knowledge about autism may predict future levels of attitude towards autism. And then I relied on self-reported scales to assess kindness and knowledge about autism. So that might be prone to common method bias. So future research can address this through experimental or other alternative ways to assess those constructs. And then the low internal consistency coefficients of knowledge about and attitude towards autism spectrum disorder might be another caveat in interpreting the associations of knowledge about autism, kindness, and attitude towards this developmental disorder. And since I mainly recruited sample in development context, so the findings are not generalizable to students from other contexts. So key takeaways: knowledge about autism spectrum disorder and kindness is indeed power, because they relate to higher levels of acceptance or positive attitude towards students with autism spectrum disorder. And then previous contact with people with ASD relates to better attitude. And then teachers and school-based mental health professionals such as counselors, social psychologists, educational psychologists, even social workers can turn to research-supported initiatives on how to bolster autism acceptance through technologically innovative platforms. So I'd like to, if you're interested about this work, then you can turn to this published article reflecting the findings of this study. And special thanks go to Dr. Christine Soryaplo Delhi and the organizers of this conference and special issue for the invitation to contribute to the quality of life among people with autism literature. Thanks a lot.